At a time when tiny portable leverless controllers are taking over the fighting game scene, the Octopus Arcade Stick is a pretty big deal in more ways than one. What we're looking at is a return to the large form factor for arcade sticks, and it feels so much like you are sat back at the classic arcades. It has a classic Sanwa JLF lever and Sanwa buttons, which are arcade standard, but what's really special about this controller is actually not something you can see right here. It's actually this. It works with the Dreamcast. Now, if you're not familiar with the Dreamcast, it came out in 1999, so I'm hesitant to say this, but it's a retro console. That makes me feel terrible. But as you can see here, it doesn't use USB. It's got a special proprietary Sega Dreamcast port for the controllers. And this is the case for plenty of other retro consoles. So what's special about this arcade stick is that it has 3 ports here, and this combination of USB-C, what looks like a serial port, and an Ethernet port is what makes this controller work with over 20 different consoles, including like Super Nintendo, Dreamcast, and just of course running on your computer. But the reason why the Dreamcast stands out among all of those options is right here at the top of this arcade stick. Lots of leverless controllers come with a screen, but this one is actually a VMU. When you wanted to save your game on a Dreamcast, you didn't use a memory card plugged into your console, you used one of these, a VMU, which were plugged into your controller. And as you can see, this opened up some really interesting options back in the day. And the company that makes this, the Octopus Arcade Stick, is obviously so into the Dreamcast that they've put a VMU right here in the center of the arcade stick. But at a premium of $450, is it worth the cash? Let's find out. Just a quick disclaimer, this product was sent to me for the purposes of making this video, but I wasn't required to say anything specific about it. I don't have to send it back at the end, and all opinions are, of course, my own. Alright, we're in the game now, and I want to show you the basic features of the arcade stick. Obviously, we've got our left movement, right movement, up to jump, down to crouch. Now, since this arcade stick lever is a Sanwa JLF, it's pretty much exactly as you would expect. Sometimes with an arcade stick, it can be like a little bit too light or a little bit too heavy, so it doesn't feel so good. But the thing about the Octopus Arcade Stick is that right from the get-go, you don't really need to worry about a lot of the things that happen with the more portable, lighter arcade sticks, because it's heavy, and as a result, it means that it doesn't kind of shift around too much. Like, sometimes even just moving the lever around, like, will cause the arcade stick to kind of, like, move around and tilt to a different angle, but you don't have any sort of issues like that with something this beefy of an arcade stick, because whatever I do to the lever, the arcade stick is not going anywhere. One thing that I love about this game is that you can do stuff that wasn't really in the original Alpha and the Street Fighter 3 series. Like, you couldn't really run like this. This was added because it's an SNK feature, being able to run, being able to short hop. Doing a basic combo, nothing complicated, seems to work just fine. Now, I'm playing this on PC, but I will also show you some footage of this working on the Dreamcast, because obviously one of the main points of this arcade stick is, in addition to being a good, solid arcade stick, the main feature is actually all the stuff that you see on this card that you get with it, which is the Quick Start Guide. You can use it with all of these different consoles, PS3, PS4, PS5, Xbox 360, even the sort of emulation machines that turn them into completely different machines. If I just get Ryu to do some fireballs, something that you probably want to see is, can it do roll cancels? If you're not familiar with it, it's when you do a roll like this, but you cancel it into a move, so you get an invincible sort of other move. Not like that. Like that. So if I get the timing right on this, I can actually go through a fireball with a move that's not supposed to have invincibility. I think I might be able to do it with a fireball as well. I think it looks best when you do it with the kicks. You can even do it with shoryukens like that. It's just hilarious. So to show you the buttons, we've got light punch, medium punch, heavy punch, light kick, medium kick, heavy kick. We've also got our L1 button, which is set to an instant fireball, or our L2 button, which is set to an instant super combo. When this game came out, it was predominantly a 6-button fighter, so these 2 buttons wouldn't have been in the arcade. One thing I will draw your attention to is the layout of these buttons. On the popular Velix arcade machines, you'll see that the buttons go up and then they just kind of go straight across. But as you can see, it's got more of a curvature to this. According to the website, this is a Sega 2P layout, so you've got that nice curve over here. And I think the idea was that if you were sitting on the 2-player side at the arcade machine, your controls would be slightly tilted like this. I don't know if that's the reason why, but also you'll notice that compared to other arcade sticks, this button is shifted right below the light punch button here. On a lot of other arcade sticks, you'll see that this button is like maybe 1 or 2 millimeters a little more to the left. One thing that's actually really nice about this layout is that you can now press both buttons like this really, really easily without having to like tilt your hand. Honestly, even on regular arcade sticks, you don't have to tilt your hand in a weird way because the buttons are so big. But one of the subtle benefits of this layout is that the buttons are almost perfectly aligned right above each other on these two rows. So you'll have to decide whether that's something that you like. I actually really like it. One thing about a big, solid, traditional arcade stick is that they can be quite loud. Pressing these loud Sanwa buttons, it's loud like you're in an arcade. Of course, being standard Sanwa buttons, it means that you can pull these out and replace them with whatever brand you want that have standard OBS-F 30mm surrounds. Now looking at some of these features along the top, some of them are dedicated for the Dreamcast, but the ones that are able to be used just regularly on your PC are the start button, obviously. In Capcom's Fighting Collection, actually the select button is what opens up your options menu. You got a home button if you're playing on a console. VMU, obviously this is more for Dreamcast stuff. You can see the screen itself. It's got a little smiley face when you're not actually plugged into a Dreamcast with a dedicated image that would normally show here. Sadly, you can't actually pull this VMU out. It is embedded in the controller. For true nostalgia, it would be really cool if like the screen could actually be pulled out like a regular VMU. We also have a turbo button. If I hold down turbo and press a punch button, you can see now that I've got super fast turbo. It's only really in these retro games where you actually see the game like completely freak out and actually try to show the animation at ultra speed. You're really not supposed to ever see it this fast. Also, you get a little red light here to show that the turbo has been activated. It even says turbo there above the light. And on the screen itself, it now says 1T. Unfortunately, it doesn't really tell me which buttons have been set to turbo. So for example, if I just turn on like a few of these random buttons, if I just press turbo and just go through them all like this and just make sure that the number is decreasing, there might be a smarter way to do that. You can do some wild combos in this game. Now, when you're plugged into PC, the touchpad actually just defaults to being another select button, so it obviously opens up our pause menu in this game. And we have L3 and R3, which is nice because obviously on an arcade stick we don't have analog sticks, but we do want access to these shortcuts. If I hold down right while pressing it, I'll be in the right corner. If I press left while pressing R3, I'll be in the left corner. Now, the thing is, these buttons are kind of vinyl soft touch buttons, which means you're definitely not going to want to use them like in the middle of a combo. We've also got the USB-C connection. We've got this serial port, which is known as the DB15 connector, and we've got our Ethernet port here for the other adapters. And over here we have our tournament lock switch. If it's on active, that actually means it's not locked, so it's a little bit counterintuitive. I think that could actually afford to be backwards. Select can be pressed when it's set to 1, but if you set it to 0, which should be off, this is actually tournament lock on, which means that I can't press the select or the start button. Just next to this tournament switch, we actually have a 3-way switch. If it's in 0, it means that we're in digital pad mode. This is just the regular standard mode where the game sees an actual digital input. But if you are playing a game that requires analog input, either you're moving the camera around or it's a game that actually requires you to play using an analog stick, you can use analog emulation of the left stick by going to 1, and then the game will think that you're pressing your analog stick. Fortunately, in Capcom Fighting Collection, it allows you to use either D-pad or analog stick. Or if you want to set it to the right analog stick, again, if you're maybe changing the camera in the customization modes in like Tekken or something, you can set that. But obviously, in a game like this, it actually just sets the right analog stick to move your character in training mode, which is quite good because actually if you want to practice having like, I need to figure out how to get out of this corner, I can use the R stick to put my character in the corner, then I can switch it back to regular D-pad mode and I can just practice using my character. Now, most people are probably not buying this controller specifically because they want to use it with Street Fighter 6, but if you are buying it for your console compatibility, then it is nice to know that you can also use it as your main stick for games like Street Fighter 6. If you're only playing Street Fighter 6, then you can probably just buy a more modern arcade stick at a much lower price. Also, just as a standard arcade stick, it's quite nice that it's slim enough. This is not the slimmest arcade stick that you can buy, but this is also not the thickest. There are some arcade sticks that get a little bit thicker for no real actual benefit or reason. Basically, the perfect height when it's sitting on my lap, and when it's on your desk, it's not too high off your desk. Because if you've ever used a traditional arcade stick at your desk, you'll know that if it's too thick, then you end up kind of like this with the T-Rex arms on your desk. When it comes to comfort, I have to say, I also just love this spacing. I don't know if this is a little bit wider than a Vuelix layout, but the spacing feels really nice. One thing that is a little bit strange is that visually it looks like it's a little bit shifted to the left, but this has no functional effect on gameplay. It's not like, oh, I wish the whole controllers were a little bit... Sometimes when the controls are way off to the left, you feel like your hand's kind of falling off the controller. This is a little bit to the left. If anything, having it slightly to the left means that your hand's not coming in quite as much at this angle with your arm like this. But we're talking about like millimeters here. This is not a big difference. When it comes to the look of this stick, it is beautiful though. This has that classic arcade stick look because it has that kind of forward lip A bit like you might find, I think, on the Velix machine. I don't own a Velix machine, but it reminds me of those panels and all these edges. It also has that classic kind of Mad Catz look from the old days when Mad Catz was a different company. They used to make the tournament edition sticks, the TE, the TE2, the TE2 Plus. But I think something you didn't see as often on arcade sticks was aluminium. Now, my Hori Fighting Edge, which is one of my favorite arcade sticks, has aluminium on it. And this is not like, I mean, it's not winter right now, so I can't really say, but it doesn't feel cold. The other thing is, if you're afraid of arcade sticks that have aluminium because it makes your hands feel cold in the winter, this is actually not aluminium on the main part of the stick. As you can see here, the main part of the stick is this plexi, this plastic here. They call it Glanova glass. I don't know exactly what the details are, but apparently it's highly scratch resistant and smudge proof. It also just feels quite strong, but as a result also the fact that it's glass or plastic means that it's not going to feel as cold on your hands if you're playing in the winter and you're allergic to that sort of thing. But just look at this stick. The aluminum is just beautiful. If you got any lamps or lights in your house at all, just the reflection of the light, the way it just kind of like runs along the aluminum, the brushed aluminum on this stick, is beautiful. And it's not just the top, but it's also the front, it's also the back here, I guess, and also a little bit on the base. Now, the main base of the controller is actually this black panel here, and you have got non-slip padding almost all over the bottom. I don't know why they didn't just fill out the whole thing, but that's perfectly fine with me. But in addition to just looking cool, one of the other important design aspects of this controller is that you can change these panels. From what I can see on the official store, you got different colors of the arcade stick. Obviously, I think this diamond edition is the most beautiful. Weirdly enough, it's actually the same price as the other models, but you can also see for $50 each, you can get these other separate plates to get you different layouts. Now, this actually says Sega 2P layout Korean. I'm not super familiar with this. There's actually an official Octoplate leverless mod that you can use to turn it into a leverless controller. And of course, you can put your own artwork in between the two layers. And something that's actually really interesting about this controller is you can buy something called the Kraken Spinner. Maybe it's like one of those Neo Geo games where you can control the angle of your attack using a spinner instead. I guess your arcade stick on the left and a spinner to change your angle. It's a bit like a twin stick shooter, but in the old arcade days. Looks like you can also buy the spinner accessory itself separately instead of with the plate. So it's really nice to have all of these official options so you don't feel like you're kind of hacking your controller to turn it into a leverless. There's an official leverless plate. There's an official Kraken Spinner plate. But the thing is, it does come at a cost, and we can't ignore that. It is $450 for this base standard configuration. It is beautiful. It is beautiful, and it does work on Dreamcast if you have the adapter. But remember, the adapter costs an extra $15, so we're talking about like $465 for a controller that will let you play on your Dreamcast. And the thing is, you can already do that with an adapter. So if you just get a regular arcade stick, you can get an adapter, which is probably, I can't remember exactly, it's like maybe $30 or $40, and it will turn your controller into something that works with a Dreamcast. The thing is, do you want to buy a SNES adapter and a Dreamcast adapter and always have all of these random dongles when you could have a controller which is dedicated to all those things and instead use this dedicated port? The question is, do you want to buy into this system? Because it does feel really cool to have something that is dedicated for working with classic consoles. And remember, if you use a regular arcade stick, you will not be getting this. A dedicated VMU built into the arcade stick. There's really nothing that beats that. Is it worth $450 to you? I think this was a crowd-funded project, and so a lot of people with crowd-funded projects, they're excited because they can get this as an early bird adopter and maybe buy this at a discount. And often with crowdfunding, they get like the first 100 or the first 1,000 units sent out at the lower price of, I don't know, $200 or $250 or $300. But the retail price of this, just looking at their official website now that this is a fully, launched product, $450. That is way more expensive than almost anything else out there. And that includes even something quite premium like the Victrix Pro FS. The Victrix Pro obviously doesn't have a VMU built into it, but if you're just looking for an arcade stick and you want to play on Dreamcast, you can just get yourself an adapter. Personally, I think if you're an arcade stick collector, you would be absolutely insane not to pick one of these up. It's expensive, but it's not prohibitively expensive. It's just that if you're not playing it on a Dreamcast, or if you have some other way to play on Dreamcast, if that's all you really want to do, you don't need to pick this up. But if you're an arcade stick appreciator and you just like something that is beautifully designed, there's just everything to love about this arcade stick. But for the casual player, maybe a little bit difficult to recommend at $450. Now, access to the inside of the controller is not super easy. You do have to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws here on the base. Apparently, this is a universal mounting bracket, so even if you've got Korean arcade sticks, which are a little bit bigger because of all the extra components inside, that should be no issue, according to the website. Something that I'm not 100% sure about is that it says this is not a fight stick, it is a weapon. You've got some beautiful cabling with green cables that actually matches the USB-C cable that they give you inside the box. Individual braided cables for every single button with angled connectors. And as I understand it, the board inside here is a special Brook board with an extender plate, which is kind of what makes all of this cabling goodness possible. So if you are interested in modding this controller, as you can see, you have plenty of extra space. Now, when it came to the Dreamcast functionality, everything was perfectly fine. The VMU is really cute. I absolutely love that there is a VMU on here, and also if you hold down the button, you can switch between 10 virtual VMUs, so you don't have to feel like you've only got one slot. You can actually have it kind of organized and have your different save files on different VMUs if you want. Tested it in Capcom versus SNK, and obviously everything worked exactly as it does when I was playing it on my PC, and also in Street Fighter 6. There's useful information on screen even telling you which of your VMUs is active. And I also tried it out in a 3D game with 8-way movement, Soul Calibur. That was good fun. Listen, I think that's pretty much everything there is to say about this controller. It is kind of awesome that we've got something like this because it's got a VMU built in. So if you've ever been looking for an arcade stick that you can use with your Dreamcast, of course you could use it with all of these other controllers if you have the right accessory, but especially Dreamcast because it had that unique feature of having a screen that you could slot into your controller. Now we are able to enjoy genuine Dreamcast games with an actual functioning VMU with screen on a modern controller, and that's really awesome. And for $450, yes, it is quite expensive. Now, that is kind of the main thing, is that although it does have some really awesome features, there's very little apart from the VMU that you can't get from just using adapters. But for pretty much everyone else, it's just a really nice arcade stick that is not officially licensed. Also, again, being a controller that's aimed at people who play on Dreamcast, it's not so mass market that they can really drive their cost down by selling billions and billions of these. So at this cost, I recognize that it's expensive, but I kind of understand that to make something niche like this, it kind of has to be expensive. For some people who are really dedicated to Dreamcast, I think you're going to look at this and go, $450 is nothing. Like the money that people spend on retro stuff is probably way more on other aspects of their collection. If you do have a need for it to play your retro stuff, it is also functional as a really good arcade stick. Really, I think there's everything to love about it. It's just not actually necessary. If you can get over the fact that it's pricey and most people don't need it, it is actually offering something really unique here that I think a lot of specialists and enthusiasts are going to absolutely love. All right, that's pretty much it for the Octopus Arcade Stick. And just like this giant beast here on the front, this is a true beast of a controller. It's extremely heavy duty. It really does make you feel like you're there back at the arcade. It's not overly thick. It's like a really good thickness to make it feel like that actual control panel on a Velix arcade machine. And when you consider all the extra thought that has gone into making sure that this controller emulates that arcade feel while also giving you the home comforts of non-slip padding on the bottom, but also just this beautiful brushed blue aluminium. You don't have to go for the blue option, but it just looks fantastic and also works with 20 different platforms. It's kind of insane. The question is it worth $450? Of course, you're the only one that can answer that for yourself. Even if you don't use it as a retro arcade stick, I would love to see another version of this controller that isn't compatible with retro consoles, but still has this build quality with this brushed aluminium and the arcade standard hardware. It is such a beautiful controller that if there were a cheaper version under $300, I would highly consider it as like my main arcade stick. So if you like the design and build quality of the Octopus Arcade Stick, definitely keep an eye out to see if they come out with a lower cost version that isn't retro console compatible. But if you like the idea of just having all the bells and whistles, go ahead and pre-order this. It's $450, but it can do pretty much everything. Listen, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I think this product is frequently out of stock on their official website, so keep an eye out to see when pre-orders are going to reopen for the second or the third batch or whatever. I've been NihongoGamer. I'll see you real soon.